Hello, listeners. Been wondering how you can help the show? Probably not. But here are 5 things you can do. 1. Subscribe. Support the show by clicking the subscription link in the show notes. 2. Review on iTunes, on our website, www.afraidofnothingpodcast.com, or on whatever app you listen to. 3. Donate. When you go to our website, click the cute coffee cup icon. Or in the show notes, click the subscription link. 4. Share. Sharing really is caring. Tell your friends and even your enemies to check out the show. 5. Watch. Wait a minute, it's a podcast, not a movie. Actually, it's both. Check the show notes to find out where to watch the documentary. You can also rent it on Prime Video. That's it. Oh, one last thing. Enjoy this episode.
What is the end game of all this? So you've had these experiences, your eyes have been opened about, you've had mostly positive experiences with these beings, and it's kind of changed who you are and how you look at, our existence and our purpose than 15 years ago. But what is the end game of them coming and visiting you?
I think, quite honestly, it's evolutionary. It's an awareness piece, and it's a teaching moment to say,
we interrupt this program for a special news bulletin. To find the answer to life, and if we're truly alone in this universe, you'll need to listen to the rest of this podcast and leave a 5-star review. Now, back to our introduction.
In a world where nothing is known, nothing is certain, reality is not real. Wake up! Be afraid of nothing. I'm Bob Heskey.
Robert.
The host with the ghost.
This is my podcast, based on my paranormal documentary, Afraid of Nothing. Each episode, we talk to people who see life and the afterlife through a different lens. Join me.
Who is this large man? And what's he doing in our bedroom?
As we lift the veil and open our minds to see beyond our eyes lie. This is Afraid of Nothing.
Tonight's guests are Lesley Mitchell-Clarke and Wes G. Roberts. Lesley Mitchell-Clarke is a Toronto-based certified clinical hypnotherapist who specializes in a number of modalities, including working with individuals who feel that they have had experiences with extra-terrestrial beings. Most of this fascinating work, as well as metaphysical therapies such as past life and interlife regression, takes place at Lesley's Toronto hypnosis clinic, Lightwork Hypnosis. Prior to her work in hypnotherapy, Lesley has also had a busy career as an actor, dancer, vocalist, and for the past 20-plus years, she has also been a top jazz and arts media consultant with an array of Grammy and JUNO-winning clients, as well as major jazz festivals and record labels. Lesley is currently the Director of LMC Media, with offices both in Toronto and Lesley's hometown of New York City. A 30-year contract professor, Wes G. Roberts had hints of alien visitations dating back to his teens. Through often frustrating nighttime experiences, then, because of a consciously recalled experience in the 1980s, Wes eventually became convinced his experiences could not be explained away by conventional theories.
Oh, we've got a great show for you tonight, listeners. This is a 2-for-1 with 2 amazingly interesting people. Lesley Mitchell-Clarke is a hypnotherapist whose clients are quite interesting. They're usually alien abductees, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. And the 2-for-1 is one of her clients, her most interesting one, is Wes G. Roberts, who is our other guest tonight. And Wes is an, alien abduction experiencer, you might say. Lesley and Wes have teamed up to write a great book called Intersections, A True Story of Extraterrestrial Contact. Welcome to the show, Lesley.
Oh, thank you so much, Robert. I'm really thrilled to be here with you and thrilled that Wes is also here. And I'm hoping we can provide some information that will be of interest to, I'm sure, your wonderful listening audience.
I'm sure you will. And Wes, we're going to start with Lesley first, but I do want to say welcome to the show, and we're going to get back to you in just a couple minutes.
Thanks very much, Robert. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. So, Lesley, you have had quite an interesting career. You did something at the beginning. You were an actress, a singer, a dancer. I've also made films in the past myself, but nowhere near the success that you have. Would you mind giving us a taste of who you were and when you got involved in hypnotherapy?
Certainly, Robert. Well, I suppose you could say I'm from a show business family going back generations. And my father was a multiple Emmy-winning comedy writer, and he wrote and produced a lot of shows that maybe your listeners watched. All the Family, The Jeffersons, Good Times, created Mork and Mindy for Robin Williams, Mary Tyler Moore,
Wow.
MASH, and the list goes, on and on and on. So we had kind of a high level of expectation in the family, and all of us are in the business in one way or the other. And I also was in the business part of it, in the sense that I did work as a publicist in the music industry for some time. But I would have to be truthful and say that I was always interested in both metaphysical or paranormal phenomena and, of course, the possibility of extraterrestrial visitors to our planet or anywhere else in the knowable universe. Now, I had some childhood experiences, which I discuss in the book, but I think I really became activated when I saw Eric von Daniken's, little 8 millimeter film, Chariots of the Gods. And all my friends hopped into a car and we went to the drive-in. Remember the drive-in theaters?
Sure.
And after I saw that film, I knew that I had experienced truth. And from that time on, I had an unshakable belief that not only had we been visited before, but that we had been visited in ancient times and were in fact the hybrid progeny of maybe one or more humanoid-like species. At a certain point in my life, I'm just going to skip ahead, I was I was having kind of a midlife crisis, I would say. But, I didn't go out and buy a red Corvette and get a mistress. I didn't do that. But
And it's not a true midlife crisis. Come on, Lesley. Yeah.
well, it was my version of a midlife crisis. I was smoking, a lot of pot and, drinking a lot of wine and confused. So my husband, bless his heart, as a gift, he bought me a past life regression. He knew I believed in multiple lifetimes. I'd had dreams and thoughts about other lifetimes. So I said, well, terrific. So I went to see this wonderful lady, and I, in fact, had a very profound experience. But what I really took away from that experience, in addition to the recountings of several past lives, what I took away is I knew that I could do that work. I knew that either I had done it in the past life, I understood it, I just knew in every cell of my being. So very quickly after that, I went to the Ontario Hypnosis Center in school and took the basic hypnosis course. After that, shortly after that, I garnered other specialties, particularly in metaphysical hypnosis. And I also work in pediatric hypnosis. I work in pain management, addictions. I have a lot of specialties that would be considered mainstream, I suppose. But shortly after, I'd been practicing for a while and I was certified in medical hypnosis techniques. I was working at a very nice clinic, and about once a month, somebody would call into the clinic and say, I have missing time, or I had a dreamlike experience where a being came in my room. Now, nobody in the clinic wanted to deal with that at all. So I said, send these people my way. And that
Was
was
this like 10
sort of
years ago, 15 years ago?
longer, 15, maybe even longer than 15 now. But it was quite a while ago. And so I began being sent these wonderful people who were all from diverse walks of life, different levels of education, different abilities to cope or process information. They were all diverse, but they seemed to have one particular thing in common, a thread of commonality. I believe that all the people that had the experiences that they reported had extremely high PSI, really strong psychic abilities. And so I think that that is part of the experience. I believe that the ETs that engage with us, the benevolent ETs, find it much easier to work with people who can communicate telepathically when called upon to do so, if you know what I mean. So anyway, that's how things got started. Now, eventually, now I'm going to say maybe 15, 12 years ago, I joined Kathleen Martin's really wide spectrum, experiencer research project through MUFON. And I began working also with a lot of the individuals who had simply made reports to MUFON. So I was involved in that experiencer research project, and also the experiencer research project that was under the auspices of Dr. Edgar Mitchell, the free FREE experiencers organization. So all of that was going on, and it just seemed to be, once I found my groove, I can't explain it any other way, I was just off to the races. Now, one thing I do want to say, I don't want anyone out there to think that I reinvented the wheel, because I did not. In working with experiencers, I simply adapted and refined regression techniques that I had already learned with regards to past life regressions and interlife regressions.
So I just want to ask you a question, because one of my first interviews was with a shaman who kind of was awakened in midlife, and he was always spiritual, but never kind of believed in the shaman aspect.
Yeah.
And once he started taking courses and learnings from people, he said it was like, you're not teaching me, I'm re-remembering this. Was that kind of the same with you? Like you felt like maybe you had taken this course before?
Well, I felt like I had practiced this modality before. Now, hypnosis is ancient in the extreme. I mean, by recorded history, it goes back 6,000 years.
Wow.
The Greeks had complete clinics devoted to hypnosis. They called them sleep temples. The Egyptians used it. The Vedic cultures used it. All of the great cultures of our deep history used hypnosis, and I believe it was, in fact, transcended from earlier civilizations on this planet.
Why did they use it? Would it be to stop smoking or the drinking, or was it for past life regression, or what?
Well, I think any of those things would be probable, but most of what I do in hypnosis has to do with the mind-body connection and really healing the body, in the sense that you are removing traumatic memories, or you are removing symptoms of an illness, or you are dealing with anxiety or depression. There simply is no limit to what hypnotherapy can be used for. And it's a very simple concept, but extraordinarily powerful. And the beings that communicated to us had a deep understanding of how the mind works and how it functions in different vibratory levels. So if you imagine that the conscious mind is just really a little tiny part of us, that we walk around with and make right brain decisions with. If you consider that, the biggest part of us is our subconscious, which, of course, that's where all our memories live. That's where all our ideas are formed. That's where phobias are formed. You name it, it goes on in the subconscious, because the subconscious doesn't always have the full story. And so in hypnosis, what we do is if we can get the body relaxed enough, and we do that in contemporary hypnosis by talking. The ancient Greeks and the Egyptians gave their patients a big opiated drink.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Lesley, mention what you do now. I was curious. I was going to ask what the Egyptians used or past civilizations 6,000 years ago used hypnosis for. Was it similar things, or why would they use it?
Absolutely similar. It was for the problems of the day, and the people accepted the mind-body connection. And as I was saying, if we can get the body relaxed enough, then that little membrane that separates the subconscious mind, where all the behaviors are formed, from our conscious mind just disappears. So the skilled hypnotist or hypnotherapist can talk to the subconscious mind and literally shut down negative behaviors. We say disrupt negative behaviors and create new neural pathways that are positive behaviors. So the ancient Egyptians and Romans and Etruscans and South Asian cultures that practice this used it not as much spiritual applications as the applications of the day-to-day lives of the people in their civilization, which were very similar to what we were dealing with. Aches and pains, pain syndromes, fears, phobias, rashes, maybe habits, maybe eating too much anise, or God knows what the thing was, but habits, certainly probably increased health, weight loss, headaches, you name it. So I would say that keeping the regression processes aside, hypnotherapy is really primarily a symptom-driven therapy, and that is what distinguishes it from psychotherapy or Freudian therapy or even behavioral therapy. We don't really dig around in that way.
Excellent overview. Now let's get Wes. Wes, you want to talk about the first time you met Lesley, or how you kind of got connected with her?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. Hypnosis is a great thing, by the way, from my perspective. I've done a lot of it with Lesley, so I'd encourage anybody who's taken some baby steps to consider it. I had a unique experience in the 1980s, which is talked about in both books. And I remembered it when I woke up. So the experience took place overnight, typically in a theta state. Things like this are going to happen because you're accessible, among other things. So if somebody wants to reach down into your world, you're accessible in your theta state more so than at other times. So I had this experience. I sat on it, honestly, for 18 or 19 years. It would never go away. I rewrote it countless times. I wondered what the heck it was. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't an out-of-the-body experience. It wasn't hallucination. Finally arrived at the thought it might be a real abduction, something I denied. So I was a denier for a long time. And so I finally decided after about 19 years, I'm going to seek some clarification, which is one of the ways I see hypnosis. And I got in touch with a person that Lesley can talk about, and this person was unable to take me on and referred me to Lesley. And then our first meeting was as it should be, a lengthy sort of triage and assessment of me as a person.
Excellent. I'm going to take my squeaky toy away from my dog in the background.
Is that what that was?
What that was?
I thought it was my back. I thought it was hinging.
On my chair.
Yeah. So you met Lesley, and Lesley, what was your impression the first time you met Wes? I mean, I think if I recall correctly, Wes came in and he expected to go right to that point, and that's not where he went in the first meeting, correct?
Well, I think I am pretty sure I had paired him by phone that we would be talking for a bit before the process began. And that is really as much about the comfort of the patient or the client as anything. I wanted to explain hypnosis. I wanted to allow him to feel comfortable that in my technique, I would not allow him to recall or re-experience any traumatic memories. If and when anything became traumatic, I would turn him into an observer, and he would still be able to process the experience, but would not re-experience it in that kind of visceral way. So what I saw was a very exhausted, emotionally exhausted, anxious, intelligent man. And I said, I have got to help this guy. Even if I can just get him to sleep, I've got to help this guy. But he came with great credibility. You know what I mean? As I mentioned a little bit earlier, the people who come to see me or request to see me are not always experiencers, and they can be people with mental health issues. And I'm trained to recognize that, because legally I'm not allowed to treat anyone with hypnosis that has a serious mental health issue. But I immediately knew that Wes was the real deal. I just knew, and that was before I ever got him under hypnosis. I cannot explain why. It was just instinctual. And of course, Wes is he's a very cultured person. He's a college professor. He has no history of mental health issues. His own personal history did not belie any type of psychological problems aside from anxiousness. And when he began to tell me about his disrupted sleep patterns, I had no doubt that he was experiencing some very incredible communications of high strangeness that were completely suggestive of ET encounters.
And Wes, if I recall, because I've listened to you guys on a couple different shows, you were actually afraid to go to sleep at night. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is 100% correct. It's much, much, much less now. It still comes up once in a while, but I was afraid to close my eyes because I thought I'm vulnerable and they're going to come get me. And so the moment I close my eyes some nights, I feel like the world's closing in on me or something's closing in on me. So I was married at the time, so I'm talking about my ex at this point, and she really put up with some erratic behavior, let me say.
And how did, when you went to see Lesley, she mentioned you're very intelligent, but you're very nervous. Did you have a hard time getting calmed down and getting into the hypnotic state with Lesley, or what was that first experience like?
So I just want to reach back to something that was said a little earlier. Presumably I went surface-wise to go and find out about my 1980s experience. Well, that came up much later, and it was because it was directed to come up, like we wanted to explore it. Did not come up the first time, but I was a typical person who didn't understand the hypnotic process, didn't understand we have a trust with our hypnotherapist and we take ourselves down that road. So I was a little bit nervous. I was thinking, do I remember everything? Will there be suggestions made? And all the usual illusions about hypnosis. Is not like that, especially in the hands of a credible master. So I think Lesley will vouch for this. I am the easiest person to hypnotize, even from day one.
Yeah, absolutely true. Wes knows exactly where to go. And some people just do because, as we touched on, all hypnosis is really self-hypnosis. I am a guide that understands the language of the subconscious mind. But nothing can happen, at least in any kind of normal hypnosis. I'm not talking about any strange permutations by the government or the, secret space program, whatever they were doing. Mm-hmm. But pure hypnotherapy, people cannot be made to do anything against their moral, ethical program. It just cannot happen in normal hypnotherapy. So, but yes, Wes was a very, very easy person to bring into trance. I have a lot of thoughts about that. I think it's because of his other spiritual disciplines that perhaps he will discuss, but particularly he is a skilled remote viewer. And I know that to do that, you have to put yourself he can explain more about it. I'm an ignoramus about it really, but I believe that you need to put yourself into an altered state, into the alpha state, to get into the unified field of information. And that's really what we are doing in hypnotherapy. We are taking people out of their conscious, distracted, overstimulated states, and through suggestion and trust and sonic things and various things, we incite an alpha state, and in some cases, even a theta state in the people that come to see us. And when you're there, when you're in those states, the feeling is that your mind can travel anywhere. And it's actually the truth. There is nothing faster than the speed of thought. And Wes and I, after a while, we began experimenting with real-time communication. But that's kind of another story. I'm going to let Wes talk about that for a minute. But yes, he was a very, very easy hypnotic subject because he knew himself and he knew how to achieve the vibrational state where he had to be. He knew how to do that without me having to do anything. However, that being said, I did like to take a big, long time inducting him into trance because I thought he could use the relaxation. Especially considering who he was married to at the time. Sorry.
Oh God, that's not getting cut.
No,
Hey,
sorry.
Quick question. So I know this might be a doctor-patient privilege thing, but we have the doctor and the patient here. So
True.
Can you talk about your breakthrough session? What was the breakthrough session? Was it the third one, fourth one? And what was the moment where Wes had the light go on for him?
Oh my goodness.
So I'm going to start the ball rolling, Lesley, and you know better than I about this, but I want to talk about being used to guided meditation, which I think prepared me well for my hypnosis. Yeah. Guided meditation, Robert Monroe stuff, the founder of the Monroe Institute and HemiSync, and that's a whole other story too. But so I was quite used to guided meditation, and I was really looking forward to it. Then after the first time, it's like, I love this because I won't give away the candy store, but the meditative techniques, relaxation techniques that Lesley uses are fantastic, and I remember them. And so some nights, if I'm having a rough time, I'll take myself through some of that, combined with some of Monroe's techniques, and be able to achieve, almost the theta state within minutes. And it was fantastic. So for me, and Lesley can speak to this, one of the premier sessions was the first or second one, in my mind.
I think outstanding to me is the first session, simply because it was such a release for Wes that the things that he had been experiencing were being really validated through hypnosis. And even in the first session, we determined that he was a lifelong experiencer. I will sometimes regress people in their own lives back to maybe the earliest time that they had an experience of high strangeness. And his experiences have been varied. I believe they've been with different cultures from different planets, although there is one consistent being who has always been with Wes and communicating with him, and he refers to her as his twin. So to me, the two most outstanding sessions that that are burned in my brain are the first one, where we just went on a very detailed, fascinating trip that resonated with truth. And when it was over, Wes just looked at me and said, "Is this true? Did this really happen?" And that was the first time that I saw him relax, in the sense that his facial muscles relaxed. I mean, the idea that his sanity, there was nothing going on with his basic sanity, that he had simply been having experiences in different states of being, some spiritual, some physical. So that would be number one. And the second session that is really quite quite exceptional to me is the first time that we engaged in real-time communication with the being that he calls his twin. And certain things occurred that were sort of psychophysical. The room heated up. You know, when you've got something paranormal that's not so nice.
Was he channeling?
It was very close to channeling, but what we were doing is I was asking questions and yes, he was answering. So it was really about as close to channeling as you can get. And you can certainly ask him about this more fully. And also I experienced visual phenomena. I saw a being, the being that is his twin, sort of laying on top of him like an overlay. I mean, not in any terrible or frightening or weird way, just a kind of an overlay. And the being was so much taller. And Wes is a very tall guy.
How tall are you, Wes?
I guess about 6 feet, and the being is probably 8 feet.
Yeah, I would say that about 8 feet. So I saw this, overlay. So I had never experienced anything like that in the realm of working with experiencers, that we could actually use an altered state and creating an environment, I guess, where the being felt safe to come through. And the fact that Wes is extremely telepathic and has a telepathic relationship with this being and was able to impart information. I asked all kinds of stuff, no matter how stupid it sounded. I asked it, and patiently the being answered every question, and it was absolutely a phenomenal experience, I felt. And we actually engaged in that type of a session, not every time, but many other times moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
So you were able to do that. Oh, interesting. And Wes, I'm going to ask you what it felt like and stuff, but Lesley, what was it seemed like you had instant trust in this overlay and this being, and that you felt like great knowledge, that they wanted them to impart knowledge to you. So what was the feeling you got? Was it shock, or what was your feeling when you first saw this?
No, it was all familiar. I can't explain any other way. And I think many of the beings that engage with us are not necessarily able to appear solidly physical in our third density. I think it may be very tough for some of the beings that are living in, say, the fifth dimension or whatever, in a different vibrational setup. But I could feel them physically. I could feel if there was one or if there were several. One time, one of the beings brought small child versions of these beings, and it felt like little kids running around in my office. So there was an aspect of me that was very aware of tuning into their physicality, although it wasn't as dense a physicality as ours is.
So I want to pause here real quick, because this is like amazing, because you hear people, hypnotherapists, talking to clients and having them share their experiences, but that you actually shared the experience with him is kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, it is, and we haven't really discussed this very much, but I think it's an important thing for people to hear. I want to demystify everything I do, right? I want to demystify it and just stress the fact that above everything, I see myself as a healer, and my job is to help these individuals who've had remarkable experiences to release any trauma associated with those experiences and to integrate their relationship with the ETs into this physical life so that they can sleep and do their jobs and do what they need to do for their own selves.
And, Wes, you can't get a better teaser or trailer for the book you both wrote than that, because and I don't want to tell too much of the story, but we'll certainly advise them, and we'll have the link to buy the book. Again, it's called Intersections, A True Story of Extra-Terrestrial Contact. And then you wrote another book, Wes, called An Experiencer's Garden, which kind of provides maybe the backdrop for all of this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But how did you feel when you're laying on the couch and Lesley is seeing what you've felt? Were you feeling it inside you, outside of you? What was that like?
So from the get-go, I have to say, and Lesley recounted part of this, when I came out of the first session, I was kind of emotional. It's like, this stuff is for real. And actually, it was a relief, even that part of it, because what if it wasn't for real? Where did that put me? So I was actually relieved that it was for real. And then Lesley doesn't direct you under hypnosis, except for the channeling bit, which I'll talk about in a sec for you. It's just like, what do you see or perceive or hear or encounter? And then maybe questions assigned to flesh that out a bit. The channeling is not like a traditional medium becoming unconscious. I was conscious of everything that was happening. So it was a different kettle of fish, where Lesley would ask me to ask my twin a question or ask my twin directly. And in some cases, the answers came very quickly, so quickly as almost to predate the question itself.
Uh-huh.
And in a couple of instances, Robert, my twin said, "This is for Lesley, so tell her this or tell her that." It was incredible, and a couple of times overwhelming, especially at one point when I was getting ticked off thinking she didn't understand human emotion.
Yeah.
And that was a stupid thing to ask her because she really laid it on me. I thought I was going to pass out.
My God.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. A wave of such deep, profound love, I guess, would you describe it, Wes?
Oh, absolutely. Something I can't experience in the waking life that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Something none of us probably experience here on the planet, down here.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, a lot of the afterlife, people I have on my show talk about that type, here it's consciousness, it's air. There it's like love. It's a totally different thing.
Yeah.
A couple questions come to mind, if you don't mind. These beings, do they have souls? Do they die? Do they have an afterlife? Do they reincarnate? You have any idea about that, Wes? Or?
Oh, gosh, this is a great topic for Lesley and I. I think we need a 2 or 3 hour show for this. But
I know, we need more time.
the one interesting thing I'll say that I've understood, maybe it's just me, myself, and I, but these beings are capable of, let me say, transgressing what we call the afterlife. They can step in and out of our afterlife, just as if it were just another dimension or another room. Even in my expanding consciousness idea of what the afterlife is, they can just step in and out of it like they step in and out of our dreams. But my understanding is that my twin, in whatever race she is, which I tend to think is a tall white or a Nordic race, maybe Palladian, she has a family. Somebody that Lesley knows, one of my very good friends who lives in Australia, met a member of the family unbidden.
Yeah.
It appeared to her in daylight, in a waking state. She wrote me to tell me that, so your twin's mate, this male being, just as tall and everything, touched her in the kitchen. It's like, what? My understanding is that they were once in the flesh, whatever that meant for them, and that they're not now, that she's always with me. And it's my fault if I can't figure that out sometimes.
Is this being a soulmate? Is it a creator? Or how would you describe it? I mean, you mentioned, I know you haven't had many interactions or any with grays, and you've had kind of with a couple different types of alien species, but is this like a person that's a creator or part of you or family? How do you acknowledge this being as?
Great question. Thank you, Robert. I would call her my beloved sister. She's family.
Okay.
And so more like I'm from her than the other way around. That's been here for a long time, and it took me most of my life to wake up to it.
I believe that Wes has experienced past lives on other planets, and that in the area where these beings live, everything does seem physical for them because everybody's vibrating at the same rate. So he has recounted, memories of being in this other planet, in this other place. And I think that we are in a big soul group with a lot of beings that are souls, that are maybe they have slight variances, maybe they have a lot of variances, but I think we're in a very big soul group that includes what we would call extraterrestrials. And I think, as Wes mentioned, I think some of them are so evolved that they can actually just step into what we call the afterlife, because they can just, adjust their vibration, if you will. It's not unusual, and we'll just take a little sidestep here in doing a past life regression or an interlife regression. It's not unusual for the individual who needs to appear before a council, not as a disciplinary thing, but just for help and love and assistance in planning the next life if there's going to be one. It's not unusual for council members to be of different species. And I only really realized this when I started asking individuals who were having past life regressions or interlife regressions to describe the council members around the table. And that's when I really started to realize we're in a big group here. And the irony is we can't even get it together on planet Earth when we're all humanoids descended from, we're all hybrids of some sort, but we can't even get along amongst ourselves. Why would we be admitted to the Galactic Federation, if there is one, while we're still warring and acting like spoiled little brats?
Yeah, I think everybody kind of thinks that. You kind of wonder this. It's kind of becoming clear to a lot of people. Wes, one thing I'm curious about your experiences. Have they been abductions where you go to a mothership? Do you have offspring, with these hybrids? Or do you just go in your mind to places? What is the experiences that you have?
So I guess I'm Heinz 57 here, because earlier experiences were more physical abductions, it seems, than anything else. And I think as I matured and as they worked with me more, was elevated to what I call psychophysical abductions, spirit abductions. And so I can sort of tell, usually most of mine are spirit abductions these days. There's one that came up a couple of months ago, and I thought to myself, okay, that is not pure spirit. They must have taken me out. So, yeah, a lot of them are just spiritual abductions. And as I said before, they happen generally when I'm vulnerable, which is generally when I'm deeply asleep. And I'll get up the next morning and say, okay, something happened. Or I'll go through my little thing. My little thing is, this is why it's not a dream. This is why it's not an out-of-the-body experience. This is why it's got nothing to do with drugs or alcohol or imagination. And the only thing that seems to be left, it was a legitimate alien encounter.
It seems if there's a pattern to these things, Bob, if there's a pattern, it seems that the kinds of physical abductions, and I will use that term because it does happen sometimes against the conscious will of someone, they seem to be occurring much more readily up until the 30s or middle age, right? Yeah. And then, as Wes said, the experiences then become psychophysical because they've worked with you. You know how to bilocate. I think really that a lot of species are getting together by not only bilocation, but by some type of organic. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you a holographic system. Yeah. It may not be comfortable for everybody to fly through space, even if there are apertures and wormholes and this, that, and superluminal flight. Maybe it's still hard on the bodies of some beings. And if you could phone in, hell, if you can get on Zoom because you don't want to get in your car and drive across town, I think there's a lot of that going on. I think there are beings that project themselves holographically into our reality.
And by doing that, they present what they think we're comfortable with, correct? I mean,
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You had mentioned earlier, Robert, that offspring, yeah, probably. At least that's what some of my experiences indicate. And I don't generally go down this road, and I probably can't right now, but people think, oh man, I want to have sex with an alien. It's like, no, maybe not.
Yeah.
The handful of times this seemingly has happened to me, they've all been deeply disturbing. And so it's like, great. It's like an assault. It's like violation. But from time to time, if there's a lighter side to that, I've been taken to see creatures that are apparently my kids.
And did you know that intuitively, or did they tell you? Or
they sort of signal it to me when I'm there. They'll put others in the scenario or up on the stage. This might or might not be my partner in the scenario. My partner may or may not be human. It could be an automaton or something else, something that they just put there and invent. And then they observe me observing things, especially my kids. None of them, I can't say, look like me. And some of them definitely do not look like humans, not totally. So it's always a curious thing when that happens to me. It's like, okay, these are my little kids scampering around and off they go. And it's like, they're looking at me though. This is about them observing me, and this is what they do. And Lesley could speak to this too. They observe us, especially in emotional or traumatic situations.
There, a lot of things are done. I mean, we could talk about this for the things that Wes has experienced that would involve, what we called screen memories or staging, where they create scenarios for certain ends, and they're very physical. And I believe many of these experiences are completely physical. So there's a lot of that. But, many, many different species are engaging with us. I don't think they all have exactly the same agenda. I think some of them are like scientists. I think these individuals that Wes engages with are almost like behavioral scientists, although they're interested in helping us and elevating our consciousness. We haven't really had a lot of nasty encounters with the Zeta Reticulites since the Truman document or the Truman Agreement, later the Eisenhower Agreement, timed out. So thank God many of these horrible experiences that both men and women have reported to me about having, sperm extracted or ova extracted and just being part of a horrible breeding program. This is not something that I really see now unless it's from an older person. By older, I'm in my own age, like in the 60s, who was dealing with earlier memories.
Now, you mentioned Eisenhower. It's funny because one of my guests actually wrote a book on the Eisenhower alien experience. And right now, Jackie Gleason, his new book, he's going to be on in a month or so. He wrote a book like apparently Jackie Gleason and Nixon were really buddies, and Gleason had a real interest in aliens. And, there's some kind of thing between them and some secrets that were shared. He wrote a book about.
I have no doubt. that that's true. Can't you just see Nixon being the big man? Let me show you this. Can't you just see that? I can see it. Although, even guys like Nixon did not have full security clearance for everything. By the time the Nixon era came along, we were already deeply embedded in a unanswerable black ops kind of secret military force that was unanswerable to any democratic actions.
When did that agreement theoretically stop?
I'm going to say that thing where the Zeta Reticulites were allowed to take genetic material to stimulate their own reproduction, I'm going to say that must have timed out no later than the late 80s.
What is the end game of all this? So you've had these experiences, your eyes have been opened about, you've had mostly positive experiences with these beings, and it's kind of changed who you are and how you look at, our existence and our purpose than 15 years ago. But what is the end game of them coming and visiting you? Where is this going?
I think, quite honestly, it's evolutionary. That you actually mentioned it in how you phrased your questions. It's an awareness piece, and it's a teaching moment to say our potential is far, far greater than we could have ever thought by ourselves, and that we're a lot like some of those other species out there. But we're, as Lesley and I had a great friend that said this, we're masters of our own limitations, so we never stop to think that. So it's like an awareness piece. It's like, okay, get out there and tell others that there might be more than meets the eye, and that looking out into space isn't necessarily a bad thing, because that's probably where we came from. So I think we're a seeded planet, and that they're trying to jog our memories. And then folks like me or Lesley, somebody will come across us, and if they cock an eyebrow and say, I wonder if that's true, then they're answering a question I always ask, which is, Now you know to what end. What will you do with this? And so my deal is to communicate it as much as I can.
And before I go to Lesley, so the two big questions people have are, one, what happens after we die? And two, is there other intelligent life out there? How would you answer both those questions?
I'd say I have 100% certainty that there'll be a slight period of darkness and I'll open my eyes. And because Spirit's eternal, it's going to continue. So it's just a different stage. I think that I'll have choices in front of me, happily so. I'm not going to hasten the process, but I'm looking forward to a fantastic adventure. And as far as others out there, my gosh, I think there is irrefutable evidence at this point. So beyond looking for a piece of craft or beyond having an encounter with an alien life form, it's like, now that this has happened, where are we going to go with this? Well, on a personal level, I'm going to pursue it till the end of days. And if I can have company in that, I'm happy.
That's awesome. And Lesley, and Wes, it sounds like you're no longer that nervous person that walked into
No.
Lesley's office or whatever.
No, he's not.
Ago. You've evolved to a mature, confident guy. You know.
Thank you.
I'm that nervous guy still, but you've evolved. Lesley, what about you? You know, what do you think the end game is, and what would you have as a message for people that ask those two questions?
Well, I think that we are dealing with contact with a lot of civilizations that have genetic relationships with us. Now, it may be that they feel a sense of responsibility. It may be that they are simply concerned for the environment, because now that we understand the power of the atom, we could blow a hole in space-time. But again, also, I think that we have unlimited power to evolve, and we have DNA that is turning on. And part of how this all works is we can evolve to a higher vibrational level. I think there is a Gene Roddenberry-like United Federation of Planets. I believe that actually exists from what I've heard, from the evidence that I have heard. We want to be accepted as members, but it's very difficult now because we have such a polarity of behaviors on this planet. We have very hateful beings and we have very evolved beings. So do we all move together? Do some of us move ahead? I'm not quite sure how it works, but I believe that where we are now, in the dawn of technology, really, and artificial intelligence and many of these other things, I believe that many civilizations have passed through this time and have done it successfully, and that the process is that it's now their turn to help us. I think they have eschewed any government involvement. I think that disclosure is a grassroots movement carried on by good people like yourselves. I think that we are going to see full-on positive contact within our lifetimes, not very long from now.
Excellent. It's a great time to be alive, even though it doesn't feel it the past couple of years.
Well, yeah, I know. Well, we're made of stardust. We're made of tough stuff. We are a hardy people and a curious people and a diverse and fascinating people, I believe. We have so many positives. We just have to stop looking at our neighbor, at our brother or sister as somebody other. Because once you look at an individual as other than yourselves, that's like having a permission to do harm.
Well, that's a great place to end. But before we end, I'd like you each to tell our listeners if they want to reach out to you. For example, Wes, how should people contact you if they want to find out more or read more?
So thank you for that. My site's easy to remember, wesgroberts.com. There are 2 books out there, and if anybody wants to contact me, it's just wes@wesgroberts.com.
Excellent. And Lesley, I know you're a woman of many talents, but and who knows, your slate may be full of people that you're talking to, but beyond the book, is there a website you have, or are there services that you offer?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you can always reach me at Lesley, Lesley, at lightworkhypnosis.com. And that's all one word, all lowercase. And I am always anxious to hear from anyone who believes that they've had an experience or they just want to chat about it. It may take me a minute to get back to you, but I always do my best to get back to everyone. And if you decided you wanted to move ahead with the regression process, it can be done on Zoom. I do it all the time very successfully. I would have never thought it possible, but it is. So there you go. I'm here to help, and I am a midwife of disclosure.
Wow. And you're so much more than that. You both are. And thank you, Lesley, and thank you, Wes. I really appreciate your time tonight.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, Robert. It was really my pleasure. And thank you for being so open with us and making us feel so
Very
comfortable
cool.
to talk about these things. I appreciate it.
You're awesome.
You've been listening to the Afraid of Nothing podcast. Please subscribe and like us on Facebook. Until next time, stay scared.
Hey, you're still here? Great. Then why not listen to another episode? Visit afraidofnothingpodcast.com to peruse all the shows. That's afraidofnothingpodcast.com. And while you're there, click the coffee cup icon to buy me a coffee and leave a review. I'll give you a shout out in an upcoming episode. And the world will know how swell you are.